Is emotional intelligence just about being nice, or is it actually the secret to raising resilient, confident kids? And here's another big question. Are some emotions good and bad, or do they all actually serve a purpose? Today's guest is here to set the record straight on these questions and a whole lot more as well, and he does it with brains and humour and a whole lot of real talk. In this wildly insightful and actually surprisingly really hilarious conversation, I talk with Professor Marc Brackett. He's the founding director of Yale University's Center for Emotional Intelligence and the best-selling author of Permission to Feel, which is right here. One of my favorite books. I'm just holding it up. So we are talking about in this episode a bunch of things to do with emotions, emotional intelligence, and parenting, of course. We talk about Marc's childhood and the mentor who really transformed his life. Guys, you have to hear his story. It actually stopped me in my tracks and I really had to get my brain online for the rest of the interview. Why emotional intelligence isn't about raising snowflakes, because let's be honest, like I hear this every 2 seconds, especially on my Instagram. What it means to actually be an emotion scientist. What is that? How do we do it? Why it's so important? How parents can teach emotional intelligence even if they weren't raised that way. And of course, we talked about how to handle our own emotions when our kids are losing it. Marc is real and funny and super smart. It was such a joy to have a conversation with him. And I promise you, this episode is probably going to leave you rethinking everything you thought you knew about emotions and emotional intelligence. So if you're ready for another really great conversation, put your earbuds in or your headphones on and let's dive in. If you're new here, hello and welcome. I'm Stephanie Pinto, the host of the podcast. I'm a mum of two and a best-selling author, an international speaker, and an award-winning coach, obviously on all things emotional intelligence. So we are far from perfect as parents. I want to point that out, and I'm glad that Marc mentioned his imperfections as well. that made him so relatable and made me feel a lot less nervous. But you know, our home is such a nice place to be because we know how to handle big emotions. We don't get stressed every 2 seconds when our kids are arguing or disagreeing about something. We rarely have those like full-blown meltdowns. I mean, our kids, you know, they have their moments, but we know on the most part really how to support them with their emotions and the behaviors that come with them. And we know how to kind of work through our own things as well, which of course day-to-day stuff comes up because we're human. The last thing I want to say is our home is a punishment-free zone. I talk about this sometimes on the podcast. I haven't for a little while. Maybe I'll do another episode on it. But this does not mean we are like soft and fluffy and permissive. It means we have boundaries, but it means that we teach our kids, we discipline them around how to behave, what is okay, what isn't, what hurts people's feelings, what's going to work out well for you and what isn't, and how your behavior impacts other people. So there is a whole lot there that emotional intelligence has really helped us with transforming, our family as a whole, and punishments don't need to come into that at all. Just before we begin, I want to acknowledge the Darug Nation. They are the traditional custodians of the land on which I live, work, and record this podcast. I pay my respects to all First Nations people, their elders and ancestors, and I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and I stand in solidarity towards a shared future. Okay, so it is so lovely to have you, Marc. I am really excited to talk to you. I have your book here. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you'll see me holding it up. Permission to Feel was one of the kind of big transformational books for me at the start, really towards the start of my journey. So I'm very, very grateful for your work and what you do. And I kind of want to dive in a little bit. You talk in the book about your childhood in Permission to Feel. Mm-hmm. I really related to some of it, particularly I often say that I was probably the world's most emotionally unintelligent person for a long time. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about that time in your life, and then how a certain person, your uncle, kind of really helped you transform things.
Sure. Well, it's interesting, when I think back about just now as a psychologist, and I think I'm 55, and I think back to Marc, the 4-year-old, the 5-year-old, the 6-year-old, and, what was he growing up with and who was he growing up with? And I had two parents who loved me a lot. I would say my parents had not gone to the University of Emotional Intelligence. However, they loved me, they cared about me, but they had challenges. They were anxious and they had anger problems and they didn't know how to deal with their own feelings. Nevertheless, mine. And at the same time, I had two brothers, one who had some psychiatric problems, the other one who had some physical health problems. And my parents were distracted, really trying to get these kids healthy. And so, unfortunately for me, the person that they chose to babysit me and take care of me was a good friend of theirs, but he was a pedophile. And so, for about 4 years of my childhood, I was abused by this man from about 5, 6 years old to around 10. And and so that was a really hard time, because I was afraid to share what was happening. I also didn't, when you have a parent who's kind of freaking out all the time and they're worried about other things, you think, I'm not gonna, maybe I shouldn't say anything because it's gonna make things worse.
Yeah.
I don't think they were really skilled at reading my facial expressions, my body language either. But I was blessed at the same time that my mother had a brother whose name is Uncle Marvin. And Uncle Marvin happened to be a middle school teacher who was developing a curriculum to teach kids about feelings. I think about this all the time, like how coincidental can it be? Serendipitous.
Yeah.
There's a boy going through this traumatic experience and suffering and not able to talk about his emotions. And then some like wizard called Uncle Marvin comes to his life who's writing a curriculum to teach kids about feelings. And that really is my story. And so my uncle, was an amazing human being who, as you know from my book, I say gave me that permission to feel.
Mm.
And I've got, he helped me get through middle school, high school, um, and obviously can, influence my whole career. And
Wow.
so,
Yeah, he put you on
yeah,
this path, on this trajectory, right?
100%.
Jeez, wow. What a powerful story. I love that. And I remember it from the book. So it was just
Hmm.
so nice hearing it
Yeah.
from you. So what do you say to people who, this is what I hear a lot, especially online, they say that emotions or emotional intelligence is soft, is fluffy, is a
Hmm.
waste of time. Or I also hear it's because obviously we're in the parent space here. We're just creating a bunch of snowflakes.
Yeah.
What's your response to that?
Yeah. I get angry. Um, I think it's because people don't understand what it is. So let me define emotional intelligence first, right? Emotional intelligence is learning how to use our emotions wisely to achieve our goals in life. And so that's the broad definition. Of course, Ruler is the model that I've worked on, which is based on my mentor's model, which states that there are five critical skills to emotional intelligence. It's recognizing emotions in oneself and other, understanding the causes and consequences of emotions, labeling emotions with precise words, expressing emotions to achieve, good relationships and communicate, and regulating emotions to, again, achieve well-being, have good relationships, make good decisions. And so when I explain that to people, all those naysayers are sort of like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, it's been put in this kind of soft skill space. But if you look at the data, which is something that I do as a scientist, you realize actually um, that emotional intelligence is highly predictive of leadership. It's highly predictive of academic performance.
Hmm.
It's highly predictive of couples staying married and in a good, healthy relationship.
Yep.
It's highly related to people who work in companies wanting to be there based on their leaders' emotional intelligence. And so the list goes on and on, about the value of the skills. And so I think we have to be better at selling the value of the skills and helping people understand what they are themselves.
Yeah, definitely. You know what? I often, and I've talked about this on the podcast, I say, I think my husband and I probably would not be together if it wasn't for emotional intelligence because we are very different. So my parents are
Hmm.
from England, so we're very, you know, polite and
Stiff upper
proper.
lip.
Oh yeah, totally. And then his family are from Portugal,
Hmm.
so they're like that European.
Let's touch each other. Let's hold each other.
I'm like, eh. So, oh my gosh, like we were chalk and cheese. But yeah, the way we now deal with difficulties and challenges, especially with our two kids, right? and their kids are, as you know, balls of emotion. So it has
Hmm.
helped us so much in our marriage, but also with our kids. And something else you mentioned there, like, in leadership, in the workplace. And I think I read some research around it really, what should I say, improves or boosts people's earning capacity as well.
Hmm.
People with higher EQ or, more stronger emotional intelligence can even earn more. So there's tons of research around this,
Well,
isn't
and
there?
just think about the people you want to be around.
Yeah.
I mean, I work at a university where everybody is smart. And I tell you, I don't want to be around everybody who's smart because, academic abilities are critically important. I admire them. But in the workforce or in a relationship, let's get real. How many of us want to live with or work with the emotionally dysregulated person? It's the worst. I mean, when you think about it.
Yeah, it's draining and it's not sustainable, really. Like relationships break up, and obviously, we in the parenting space, we can't break up with our kids, but man, it pushes kids and parents apart if we're not responsive to their
Completely.
emotions and we don't understand them. So, which is why I love emotional intelligence for parents. You already talked about the ruler framework. That
Yeah,
was one of my questions. I was like, gotta ask
sure.
you. So to recap, the ruler framework is recognizing your emotions, understanding the causes and consequences, labeling them, expressing them. I feel like in the book I read, expressing them in the right way at the right time to the right person. Like it's not just
Correct.
saying I'm really mad.
No, I mean, expressing emotions, and this is a misconception again, doesn't mean you say whatever the heck you want to say, whenever you want to say it, however way you want to say it,
Mhm.
right? There are norms in society. There are cultural norms. There are norms. I visited Australia, right? It's so Westernish in terms of its way of being, but it's still not quite the same as it is in New York City, or Connecticut, where I live. And so it's picking up on those nuances and kind of relating to it. And expressing emotions, can be in writing. It could be in the way we converse with each other. Um, it could be through music.
Yeah, wow. I love that. Okay, so thinking about parents, many parents struggle with their own emotional regulation while trying to
Hmm.
teach emotional intelligence to their kids. What advice would you have for parents or for people who are feeling triggered or overwhelmed by their kids' sometimes big emotions?
All right. So, firstly,
Big question.
yeah, an emotion is an emotion. It's an experience. Just because you're having a big emotion doesn't mean the world's coming to an end. It just means you're having a big feeling. So, I think the first step is just changing your mindset. My kid is having a tantrum. Oh my God, that's terrible. Like either I have to like put it out or, I have to run away because I can't handle it or yell and scream to punish it. No, like anxiety it can be big or it can be small. Anger can be big, can be small. Anger can be healthy and productive. Like you want your kid to be furious when someone treats them unfairly.
Mm.
It's normal to be anxious before a test, you know? So I think the first step is giving your kids the permission to feel all emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say in my research, there's no such thing as a good emotion or a bad emotion. You know, um, Happiness, for example, people, oh, happy is great. Well, guess what? Super happy people, are somewhat annoying to me, just to be frank. It's like, what are you so happy about? Like the world's coming to an end. Um, but really, the point around that is that, if you're at a funeral, happy is weird in
Mhm.
certain cultures. If you're about to do really detailed work, or hand in a proposal or, a report at work, being happy is probably going to lead to making more errors and more mistakes because you're different, your thinking style is different. So you might think like, oh, it's good enough. Well,
Yes.
guess what? It's not. You should have been a little bit more critical.
Yeah.
And so I really like people to move away from like the goal is to be happy all the time, and the goal is to get rid of all of your anger and sad feelings. Um, and more is be a scientist about your feelings. Be curious about them. Try to get
Mhm.
granular and specific about them. Ask yourself questions. Is this feeling helping me or not helping me in this moment or to achieve this goal? And if it's not helping, then we figure out what to do about it.
Yeah.
So for parents, going back to your question, is I think step one is permission to feel, know about emotions. Step two, I have a little phrase. I say you have to deactivate before you can co-regulate. And so what I mean by that is that, parents very easily get triggered by their kids. It's like, I hate you. And then all of a sudden you're like, who do you think you are talking to me that way? And it's all a battle. Whereas if you just take a breath and you notice, like, wow, and like my kid is having some big feelings right now, or wow, like this is not why I wanted to become a parent.
Yeah.
And just take that breath. And then you realize in that space, you can kind of deactivate your nervous system. It's just going to make it so much easier for you to connect with the child, to help them calm down,
Mm.
and then, do the problem solving that might be needed.
Yeah. Yeah. That pausing is so important, so powerful.
It
And yet
is.
it can be so hard to find those little moments. I love that you mentioned the emotion scientist. I was going
Yeah.
to ask you about that. Is you kind of covered a little bit of it. Tell us, like, what is an emotion scientist?
Yeah. So I contrast that with the emotion judge. So the emotion judge is like, get over it, move on, whatever emotions, like, really, who cares? You don't like the way I deal with my feelings, get over it, move on. Like, this is who I am. There's nowhere to go as the emotion judge. It's a dead end. There's no openness. The emotion scientist is open, curious, reflective. The emotion scientist says, I hear you're saying that, it sounds like you're upset, but upset is not, let's get more specific and granular. Is it disappointment? Is it anger? Is it frustration? If you're anxious, is it anxiety or is it stress? Okay, let's think about a way to support that feeling. What do you need right now? What can I do to support you? And so the emotion scientist is kind of asking those open-ended questions and being kind of a healthy co-regulator as opposed to dismissive, ignoring the emotion.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I have a goal of creating a world filled with emotion scientists.
Yeah. And I love your app. So I'm going to put the information to, you have a webcast on YouTube, you
Mm-hmm.
have your app, you have obviously all of your work that you do in schools and at Yale. Obviously that will all be in the show notes, but
Thank
I
you.
wanted to, because I opened it this morning and this is your app. So
Yes.
I love that it's really, let's find some words to help us describe how we're feeling. Let's find some strategies to help me with these emotions. And
Mm-hmm.
then can we identify some patterns through like daily tracking? And so I've been like glued to it because I love it. But I also really like that you mentioned um, this concept of emotional granularity. So being more
Yeah.
specific, being a bit more nuanced with how we're
Mm-hmm.
feeling, instead of just saying I'm feeling good or I'm feeling really bad or
Mm-hmm.
I'm pissed. We're
Yeah.
actually getting better at being more specific. Can you tell us a bit about that and why that's helpful or important?
Yeah. So there's two terms in psychology that we use to get into this space. One is emotion differentiation, which is just really being clear, like, am I frustrated or am I overwhelmed? Because those are very different experiences. People confuse them. I tend to get frustrated when my goals are blocked. I tend to get overwhelmed when I'm saturated with emotion. So that's just important to know. That's like differentiating, different categories of emotion. I find in my research that 99% of people cannot tell the difference between anger and disappointment.
Wow.
People just can't define it. It's one is stronger, one is not as strong, one is inner, one is outer. I'm like, but that's not, give me the definitions. And so anger is about injustice, disappointment is about unmet expectations.
Mm.
Now, why is that important? Because behavior can show up looking like anything. I
Mm.
can come home as a kid and say, I hate you, mommy, or stomping my feet. And if I stomp my feet as a boy, you're like, oh, he's angry. If I cry as a girl, oh, she's sad. Well,
Mm.
that's stereotypes. That has been learned through socialization that girls are supposed to cry when they're upset and boys are supposed to stomp their feet when they're upset. Meanwhile, we're making an assumption that the boy is angry and that the girl is sad when the boy might be sad and the girl might be angry. They're just expressing it in a way that has been deemed appropriate for their gender or for their age. And so we've got to move away from that. And so getting granular and asking good questions is about helping to really learn what the feeling is. So if it's in the anger family, you want to know, is this something that are you livid? Has this been a very major violation? Or are you just irritable or peeved? Because the strategies, that we would use as parents to support our children in managing those emotions are very different. If my kid is livid, we're going to remove him from the situation. We're going to go for a long walk. We're going to do some breathing exercises because you can't process when you're livid. But if my kid is irritated, we can say, honey, let's just talk about it. What's going on? Let's just, it's understandable that you might be kind of upset about what happened or peeved. But let's think about, you didn't want it to take your toy. All right, so let's figure out what we can say to that other person, that other boy or girl, about that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So there are, I think, a lot of people who did not grow up with emotionally intelligent
Yeah,
caregivers or
most.
parents. Most. Yeah. Would you say it's most? Are you thinking, oh man, from my research, it's like 90, you know?
I do have data on that. 90% of people report not having had a comprehensive emotion education. And only 5% said they got something that was effective or helpful in school.
Mm.
So guess what? Stephanie, you got some work to do.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we've got an uphill battle. But I think, are you seeing that it's more acceptable and people are actually seeking this out? I mean, your work in schools and in workplaces, like people now
Yeah,
are saying, hey, what is this emotional intelligence thing? Like I think there could be something to this.
I do see that. But I will say that everybody's still looking for the quick fix,
Mm.
you know? And everybody just thinks like, you're going to go to yoga class and all of your life's problems are going to go away. And I've been doing yoga for 4 days a week for 25 years. I still have a lot of issues. um,
I love it.
and I just think I really think the message, which is a hard one for people, is that this is just part of life's journey. Cultivating your emotional intelligence is really just part of your life's journey.
Mm.
And who knew the freaking pandemic was going to hit? Like in Australia, right? You guys had major lockdowns.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure that the parents who are listening had some moments of excitement and deep despair during those times, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you can't predict, like, oh my God, I'm going to be locked in a house for 6 months and not be able to go out. Like, how would I have the strategies to deal with that when I've never even anticipated it might come?
Yeah. Mm. Impossible. Really, really hard. So you
And,
mentioned,
and you get older, like I'm 55 now and like I feel healthy. I'm in good shape. But like, I have like friends who are getting sick, you know. I just found out that a friend of mine that I hadn't spoken to in a couple of years passed away. And I
oh,
was like devastated. Like this guy was 58 years old. Like, and so like
young.
dealing with like, as we get older, we have to deal with loss. Like you're not dealing with that when you're in kindergarten and third grade.
Yeah.
So my point is that like even the strategies like this way I speak to myself in a kind and compassionate way evolves,
Yeah. Oh, wow.
which is beautiful.
Oh, so you mentioned one of my last questions was about, what
Yeah.
are some things that you do, one or two things that maybe you can share with us day to day? You mentioned yoga, doing that four
Yep.
days a week. Amazing.
Love it.
But what else?
Uh,
Yeah, what are some other little daily practices that maybe you weave in your day or, that people you could share with us?
yeah. I mean, I am one who like thinks about this stuff a lot. And so I have rituals.
Mhm.
Like my morning ritual is, you'll love this because you're from Australia, is I have an amazing flat white every morning.
Ah,
And my flat white is like a sign of, I can't even put words to it. I have my little cappuccino machine. I make my cappuccino. I sit by myself for the first half hour of my day, do a little breathing exercises, make a little plan for the day. And I have to say, it really makes a difference to just, it's like, I'm very like deliberate about setting my day up for success. I also lift weights 4 days a week. I find that to be extraordinarily important in terms of like just feeling strong. And I like feeling strong. Not that I'm like some tough dude now, but I like um, and I also have, and I know this may sound cliche, but I didn't grow up with a lot of resources. We struggled and there was just it wasn't an easy time. And, I'm fortunate. I have a great job and a really great partner. And I bask in gratitude. Every time I get like, I feel a little inferior, or I have a little imposter syndrome, or I feel like I'm not good enough, or I haven't done enough. I just take a breath and I'm like, Mark, look around. Like, you got a pretty good life.
Mm.
And I just think that we need to do more of that. We just need to spend more time, recognizing that many of us have a lot to be grateful for.
Mhm. Wow. I really like that. Bask in gratitude. Bask.
Yeah,
Bask.
bask, whatever.
And you're flat white. Oh my gosh, that's so Aussie. I'm a latte. I'm a latte person, but
Yeah, I'll do the
same
latte. I'll
thing.
take anything. And by the way, if I had it my way, I'd have a little beautiful cafe like you have all over freaking Australia that I'm so envious of, where I'd get my amazing, avocado toast with poached eggs every morning. You'd see me like I wouldn't need strategies to regulate. I would just be,
Yeah,
in
you'd just be
heaven.
floating. Oh, look, there's Buck floating by. I do like a smashed avo. We call it smashed avo here on
Oh,
toast.
that's right.
And
I love that. That's what
yeah,
it's called. Yeah.
in a latte. I was up early at 7. Well, early for me. I was up. A friend and I have started to try and meet each other once or twice a week at a cafe at 7 a.m. And we take
Mm,
our workbooks and laptop and we just set ourselves up for the day or the week. And I get a
love it.
latte, and and that's it. I didn't realize until now that's a little ritual like you have. Of I really look forward to it. It brings me joy. It sets me up for the rest of the day. And when I don't do it, I'm
Yeah.
like, damn it! Like I haven't done that.
Cooking for me is another one, by the way. It's like, and my partner thinks I'm controlling because, I like to eat healthy foods and I am a little controlling. However, um, I love making dinner. It's like the end of the day, and I just like the process of preparing the food and then just so like, that's emotion, regulation is it's the exercise we do, it's the breathing exercise we do, or it's the rituals we have, and
Mm.
it's the cognitive stuff, in terms of gratitude and being kind to oneself and being kind to other people.
I'm glad you said that. I think that's a great way. That's a great way to kind of round up. Emotional intelligence
Yeah,
is not just what we do in the moment when we're really peeved or really angry. It's
absolutely not.
what else are we doing in our life day to day, holistically, like the exercise or the food we're consuming, and um, the rituals that we have. I think with, you take away a 4, 5 of those things that we do each week, and then yeah, we're going to be snapping with our partner or our
Hmm.
kids. And so, okay, you have mentioned already a couple of myths about emotional intelligence. To round up, I like to kind of ask: is there a myth or a misconception or something that we didn't cover that you want to kind of set the record straight on, or would like to leave with us?
I'll leave you with my newest research,
Cool.
which is on the characteristics of the Uncle Marvins in the world. And
Oh,
there are three that I
okay.
hope every parent aspires to cultivate.
Mm-hmm.
The first is non-judgmental. Our Uncle Marvins, our Aunt Marias, our parents ideally are non-judgmental. The second is they're just kick-ass listeners. And the third is they show empathy and compassion. And I've done this in Australia. I've done this in Spain and Italy, obviously in the United States, and even in Hong Kong. And across the world, what I find is that the people that we benefited the most from in our lives, the people who created the conditions for us to be our true, full feeling selves, always have those three things: non judgmental, good listening, and compassion.
Whoa. That's mind-blowing. Three simple, I mean, they're simple. They might not be easy, but
They're
really
very
powerful.
difficult. And there's a lot of people, I don't have time to be non-judgmental. I don't have time to be listen. I don't, I'm like, you don't have time
Mm.
to be non-judgmental, but whatever. We'll get into that at our next conversation. But those are the top three. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Thank you for such
Thank you.
just such a joy to talk to you. And you have been so real and so raw as well. You've shared so much and you just have not held back. And I know you're busy, so I'm really, really grateful. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Hey guys, it's me again. Well, wow, what a conversation. I hope you guys are walking away with a fresh perspective on emotions and emotional intelligence because let's be real, this stuff changes lives. Now, if you loved this conversation and you want to bring emotional intelligence into your child's school, it's way easier than you think. I speak at schools both in person and virtually, so no matter where you are in the world, I can run a workshop or a presentation or a talk for teachers, for staff, even parents. All it takes is a simple email introduction to a teacher or a principal, a director, an administrator, and we can actually make it happen. And of course, if you're looking for some more hands-on support, then check out my courses. This is where I dive deeper into emotional intelligence and how we can raise emotionally intelligent kids, resilient kids, connected kids, and of course, for ourselves as the big people in their lives, how do we raise ourselves? How do we bring in some more emotional intelligence into our lives? Because let's face it, like Marc said, a lot of us were not raised with this kind of parenting. Anyway, thank you for listening. You can check out all of that stuff in the show notes. You can have a look for a lot of Marc's links, his book, his YouTube, his app, all amazing resources. And of course, you can find my stuff on my website at stephaniepinto.com. You can find the courses and you can reach out if you want me to come speak at one of your places. I would love to do that. All right, if you found this episode helpful, I actually really encourage you, just have a think, is there one or two people, like a friend or a family member that you might want to share it with? That would be amazing because, I mean, I'm biased, but I want to share this stuff with as many people as possible. So I'm going to say thanks in advance and take care. I will see you guys for the next episode next week.